Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life.
In today's podcast, I am talking to Katie May. Katie is the author of You're on Fire, It's Fine: Effective Strategies for Parenting Teens with Self-Destructive Behaviors. She's a licensed therapist and a frequent speaker and a group practice owner where she specializes in supporting teens as they move through these crisis moments in their lives. This reminds me that I wanted to tell you guys about the newest course that I'm running this spring. In May 2026, I'm going to be launching a live teaching course that's focused specifically on kids in distress. It is the summary of all the hardest things I've had to learn through my own kids' distress with burnout, frequent meltdowns, and sibling dynamics, as well as the lessons and patterns observed from coaching hundreds of families whose kids have been in burnout. It's really another layer of low demand. It's like low demand on steroids. When your kid is in such chronic distress, whether they're a little kid with epic meltdowns or school refusal, or a teenager dealing with all the self-destructive behaviors that I'll be talking with Katie about in this podcast. There's so few places where we get the kind of direct teaching and support about what's happening and how do we support our kids. What practically do we do in the worst moments? So many places you get be proactive and make sure to prevent it, because the best work happens in prevention. And I have also said all those things, so I agree with that. But we need spaces where we get direct teaching about what to do when you did everything you could to prevent something from going wrong and you're in the crisis moment anyway. This will be an 8-week course. Everybody in the course is also either in a crisis moment themselves or in a long-term burnout that they need support in recovering from. We'll be going deep into my 3-part framework for understanding burnout as a series of phases, and just truly a compassionate, zero shame community where we are truly held and seen in our toughest moments. So if that feels like it's for you, please check the show notes for more details on this course. It's going to be launching in the beginning of May. So signups are open soon. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Amanda, it's good to see you.
We are going to talk about teenagers today, and I'm really glad to talk to you because, number one, I haven't parented teens for more than 6 months now. Not a lived experience, although I have been a troubled teen. So I have my own story of what worked and didn't work in my own journey and how I'm living from that place. But you share in your book, which I really loved, about your own story, about your professional experience, and how you're bringing all those things together to create a really alternative paradigm for kids who are struggling. So I want to get right to the heart of that. One of the things that I find is hardest for parents to understand is why teenagers turn their pain inward. I wonder, from your experience, what are the core drivers of those kind of self-destructive or high-risk behaviors that teens are taking on? And what are the most common misunderstandings that people bring to those behaviors?
I love that right away you're asking the question of what are the drivers of self-harm. So we're already identifying and highlighting from the start that the self-harm in essence is a solution for a deeper problem. Because as parents, of course, we're going to feel scared, want that behavior to stop, and the goal is ultimately for it to stop. But the idea is that we need to understand what's happening underneath of that. And the way that I describe it regularly is when you have an individual who feels their emotions deeply. In my book, I call them fire feelers. And the reason for that is because when they experience an emotion, it comes on quickly and it gets really big. It feels like they're on fire with their own emotion. And when you can picture that and really think about it that way, my teenager is experiencing an emotion and it feels like they are on fire with that emotion. Their brain comes up with a solution to make that fire go down. And a lot of those solutions are escape strategies. How do I get out of this situation? How do I make this stop quickly? And that's where self harm or the idea of self harm pops up because it works to re regulate the nervous system and bring them back to a place of baseline or at least reduce those flames so it's less painful for them.
Yes. And so then tell me about the way that gets misunderstood. What do people think they're seeing?
Mhm.
And how do you bring in the what's actually happening to help parents change their view?
The biggest misconception is that self-harm is a primer for suicidal ideation or suicidal behaviors, and they're both escape strategies. In fact, sometimes when an individual, a teenager, is thinking about suicide, that is also helping their nervous system re-regulate because it's a daydream of escape. But self-harm is not suicide. It is harmful, but it is also harm reduction if we're thinking about suicide as more dangerous. So that's my starting point always is to educate about the difference between the two of them. But I would say that for parents who have a teenager who's thinking about suicide, who's self-harming, the reaction is probably very much the same because you're seeing your child hurt themselves. And nobody thinks when they're holding their child in their arms, when they're a baby, my kid is going to grow up and hurt themselves one day, or they're going to be at danger for doing something really dangerous that could result in them not being around anymore. And so the reaction is one of fear, of pain, sometimes of blame or shame. There's a strong emotional reaction from a parent, regardless of what it means, whether it's suicide, self-harm, or something else.
Yeah, yeah. And in low demand, what often gets characterized or caricatured, I would say, is that we either are coming down hard with strong rules and boundaries, which people say makes kids feel safe, or we're embodying compassion and understanding and trying to make them feel like what I often say is you are good enough right here, just the way you are, that you don't have to
Mhm.
change in order to please me, that I'm with you like just like this.
Yeah.
And those things get pitted against each other, or they're like two ends of a spectrum, people would say. And so then compassion and truly and understanding and empathizing with that fire is
Yeah.
seen as weak or unsafe or bad, wrong. Fill in
Well,
the word. Tell
yeah,
me
I can tell
more
you.
about how you understand compassion as a strategy for teenagers who are really suffering.
Yes, I can tell you the biggest fear in compassion, or what I would say as a tool, is validation. Is if I show compassion, if I empathize, if I validate, does it mean that they're going to think it's okay, or is it going to make the feeling worse? Sometimes if somebody looks upset and another person acknowledges it and they say, "Are you okay? You look sad right now." And all of a sudden the tears start coming. Yes, sometimes when we acknowledge or validate, it gives people permission to feel their emotions, but it doesn't mean that they weren't there to begin with. It just means now they feel like they can unmask or feel seen or feel comfortable showing because it's been named out loud. And so when I hear what you're saying about the polarization of compassion versus rigidity or rules, I think about the work that I do in dialectical behavior therapy, which is the kind of therapy that I'm certified in. And the what works in the therapy that I do is the balance of acceptance and change. It's not one or the other. It is actually the synthesis of the two of them. And the first tool or the first step in addressing these safety concerns with someone who's on fire with their emotions is to validate the underlying emotion. We cannot move towards change. We cannot move towards behavior shifting until we've been able to validate the emotion or make someone feel seen. There's actually been brain scans done of people experiencing emotions and how validation decreases the emotional intensity, which in effect makes their brain more flexible to being open to changes because they've been heard, seen, understood. Their experience has been registered by the other person.
Hmm. Yeah. So I want to not push you, but just push that idea a little bit further because that
Push
sometimes
it.
works. Okay. It works counterintuitively for some PDAers specifically. So this is a place that with young kids, we often get really force fed this message of if they're sad, oh, I see that you're sad. Oh, you're so sad. We're taught that kind of behavior. And I'll tell you, that's one of the worst things you can do to a little PDAer is narrate or sportscast their emotions. They really hate it. It's one of the places that people bump up against gentle parenting when they have a young one for the first time, where they're like, okay, this stuff is totally not working. So I'm imagining that is true. I know it's true for PDA teens, but I think it's true for a lot of teens that it can feel belittling to say, gosh, that must hurt so much. You're so mad right now. That it feels I know what you're saying is that kind of acknowledgement, that validation is essential. So how do we do it in a way that actually feels good to a teenager who really does not want that kind of language or that kind of narration?
And what you're speaking to is the important nuance in it's not about the words you say or the script or getting the emotion exactly right and repeating it back, but it's learning the language of how your child or teen expresses emotions and what they need from you in those moments. Validation doesn't have to be, oh, you look really sad right now. It can be, I'm sitting in the room in silence while you're playing the guitar because I know that you need me near you, but I know that saying something makes you feel too vulnerable and will make you push me away. It can be recognizing that your teen is really tense when they walk in the front door, and that the most supportive or validating thing that you can do is notice how tense they are and that they want to go upstairs to their room right away and they don't want to talk to you at all. And it's something that I find myself talking with parents about a lot because they'll say, I tried that validation script and it didn't work for me. So I'll often share, like, I have a teenager and I've tried those validation scripts, and my teenager will say, I want you to be my mom and not my therapist, because that's how they interpret validation scripts. And so I have learned the language of how to respond, validate, or not respond to my teen so that they feel supported and understood. Doesn't mean you're going to get it right the first time. It means that you're collecting clues and data about how they respond and then iterating until it feels effective.
Okay, I love that. I just want to highlight, gold star, underline. It's how it feels to the teenager, not whether you're doing it right or not.
Validation is in the experience of the receiver and not in the message of the giver, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense.
I find myself when I'm training my team, I say we work with humans, not computer programs. So here's the framework, but how does it fit for this client that's in front of you? So we do a lot of work with what's the level of risk? What does that look like? So if I were a parent looking at my child and they didn't have the words, or they have a hard time registering their emotions in their body, or they can't communicate that, am I seeing them as more antsy? Am I seeing them as crawling out of their skin or wanting to leave the room or wanting to be alone more? And then getting more information from each teenager who's experiencing this on what will be helpful, which sometimes is sending memes, sometimes is sending the dog into the room without talking to them. It's understanding the language of what they need to feel heard and understood.
Yeah, you're speaking exactly to reading the nervous system. It's basically what you're doing. You're looking for the outward signals of what's happening on the inside. That's where the fire's burning, basically. And so talk us through, especially in these really intense behaviors, suicidal ideation. For a lot of our kids, it's staying in their room 24 hours a day, playing video games, not communicating. So what's actually happening in the nervous system in those moments? And how do we tell if what we're doing is helping or hurting based on those nervous system responses? How do we read that, decode that?
Yeah, I look at it in two parts because there is a very clear connection between somebody who has, I will say, a sensitive nervous system or a biologically sensitive system and what happens in their environment that leads to these self-harm or self-destructive behaviors. And it is when you have someone who experiences these emotions so deeply. So that is typically, I want to say, fight or flight in your system, sometimes freeze or fawn, depending on what's happening or what you're seeing. When you have someone who has a response that the environment growing up, environment being parents, coaches, teachers, siblings, whoever, grandparents, whoever is giving that feedback, is saying, you're too sensitive, your emotions are wrong, this is no big deal, stop crying, go take a nap. All of these things that are messages from the environment that says your nervous system is wrong. The way that it handles information and responds is wrong. That is the message that they get. So this is when that interaction happens again and again over time. And then there comes a point when this individual experiences those emotions, has that nervous system response, and their brain says, is this wrong? Is this the wrong response? Is my meter faulty? Should I not feel this way right now? And so the behavior shows up to make the emotion go down or go away because it's a bad and wrong emotion to have. So I wouldn't say that it's a difference in the nervous system. It's how the environment has shaped the person to think about how their nervous system responds.
Gosh, okay. Yeah, I love that. And that brings, it's not just the environment too. We can zoom out and look at and what are the bigger systems
Of
saying about this
course.
person. And yeah, it all compounds. So
Yes.
the more marginalizations that they hold or the farther that they live from the assumed norm, the more
Mhm.
that they internalize those messages of I'm wrong, there's something wrong with me. And then that
100%.
fuels the escape is
Yes,
mhm.
exactly. I call that traumatic invalidation when it's not this one big trauma, but the daily experience of living with your experience being invalidated is certainly traumatic and impacts the nervous system and impacts how we handle situations because we internalize messages like, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm defective, I can't do it, I shouldn't feel this way, my feelings are dangerous. So that all comes from the interpretation of that ongoing experience.
All right, I know people are with us and saying, okay, I get all of this. I've heard this, or I hear you
Mhm.
now and I believe you, but I'm still watching my kid suffer and hurt themselves right before my eye. And there's
Mhm.
this really intense sense of I can't just let them. I hear that all
Of
the time.
course.
I don't know if you do too, but I'm like, no, that isn't the intention is not for you to
Not the
just
goal.
let them. Exactly. So talk
Mhm.
us through some things that, since we mostly have parents listening, that parents can start doing from a posture of compassionate listening and attunement.
Absolutely. If you have a child or teen who is self-harming, I would say 100% my first step is getting them into therapy. So there's someone else supporting the situation. The main skills that we want teens to be learning are number one, awareness, awareness of when my urges show up, awareness of when they're so high that I act on them, awareness of what my feelings are in general so that I know how to better understand and communicate them. And then, truly, to stop self harm behaviors, we need distress tolerance skills. We need a set of skills that helps us tolerate distress at different levels when I'm a 10 out of 10, when I'm an 8 out of 10, when I'm a 6 out of 10, and in different environments when I'm home alone, when I'm home with my family, when I'm at school, when I'm with friends. And we need support in practicing those skills in all different environments so that they generalize, so that it's something that works on autopilot and it doesn't require a lot of thought to remember because when you're escalated or activated, it's really hard to remember, oh, I do have a skill that works unless it's been practiced or it feels more natural for us. That being said, I can't talk about treating the teen without talking about the parent component
Mm.
because the environment, again, is one of the biggest strategies for change for children and teenagers. We used to just treat teenagers and then send them home into environments that hadn't learned their own skills or learned the same language of skills. And it would be hard for teens to sustain change because their caregivers didn't understand the changes they were making or how they connected to the bigger goal of stopping self-harm or creating a life that was worth living or that they wanted to engage in. And
Mm.
so we're helping parents learn the same skills. Parents need to learn when they're too activated to problem solve. I share a lot about this is just a common dynamic that a teenager will be saying, leave, not effectively or skillfully, but saying, leave me alone. I don't want to talk right now. I just want to be alone. And that's actually what they need. They're just, their tone or the way they're saying it is not landing well with a parent because a parent is thinking it's disrespectful or you can't talk to me like that, or they can't tolerate not solving the problem right now. So they're chasing after them. And so they're trying to solve a problem in a moment when they should be separating. And that's when we see escalation and crisis to punching walls, bigger problems, bigger arguments when each side understands what I need to separate and what I need before I can come together, it makes the process go a lot more smoothly.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Two thoughts. One is that trusting teenagers when they're engaging in unsafe behaviors, a lot of parents start to think, I can't trust anything you say. And so then they're like, you're telling me that you need me to leave, but how do I know? How can I trust you? And I
Yeah.
think it is really radical to say, yes, you're self-harming, and yes, I can trust you, to hold those two things at the same time. And you're speaking to that. Can you say a little bit more about how we can nuance that trust that we have in them?
What's required for that level of trust is communication. And so we use a lot of strategies, like I'll say, use a code word. If you're truly at a level where you can't handle your emotions and you think you're going to act on them and do something dangerous, maybe it feels uncomfortable or shameful to say the words, but you can say banana jacket or whatever. Come up with your own code word to communicate. And it's required that parents have their own ability to tolerate that distress. Not to say if your child's in crisis, leave them alone and don't go check on them,
Mhm.
but we call them safety behaviors, and not safety in the sense of keeping everyone safe, but safety in the sense of your anxiety spikes up validly because your child wants to hurt themselves. Your anxiety spikes up, so you go in and you check on them. Your anxiety comes down. You leave them alone for a while until you start thinking, what if they're hurting themselves? What if they're hurting themselves? So you go in and check on them. Anxiety goes down, and it starts a reinforcing cycle of your behavior gets it's your own behavior that the emotion goes down when you start doing it regularly. So we
Mhm.
want to break that cycle because ultimately we want teens to grow up to be successful in whatever way that looks like for them, adults who can take care of themselves, who don't need a parent to check in on them for safety concerns every 5 minutes. And so in order to do that, we need to build trust with communication and build skills for each side.
Yeah. I'm remembering when I was a teenager in a particularly difficult moment, and everybody says things that they don't mean or shouldn't say in a difficult
Sure.
moment. But I still remember this that my parents said, we gave you rope and you hung yourself with it.
Oof.
And oh, I know, right? I think what they meant was like, we tried trusting you and you
Mhm.
took our trust and did. And so then from there, it was more like punishment and
Mhm.
control and like all the strategies where we can't trust you. And so I think that there is a real dynamic tension for parents around this incredible urge to keep their kids safe, but that the kind of behaviors that leads to actually makes them less safe because
Right.
you need trusting connection to grow. There's no other environment for it. Can you say a little
Exactly.
bit more about that dynamic and how parents, out of their own trauma, end up making things
Mhm.
worse for their kids?
Yeah, we see this all the time where parents have a trauma response to teen self-harm or teen suicidal behaviors, and that makes a lot of sense when we think about the criteria that need to be met for PTSD or some kind of trauma response is one, some kind of life-threatening behavior, which they're perceiving self-harm and or suicidal behaviors that way. And then two, we see signs of hypervigilance, like being always on, wanting to double check and check in on things, intrusive thoughts, having intrusive thoughts that my child has hurt.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think of the importance of trauma care for the parents that find a therapist who believes you and who will give you top level trauma care, not just talking about it. There's a lot of different avenues that show that just talking about our experiences when it comes to trauma is really not effective. It's not as effective as what we really need, and that some of these more body-based or neural rewiring strategies are really what's needed for trauma. And I think that parents deserve that kind of care. So I hear you saying
Absolutely.
that, and I want to just underline it 3 times.
Yes, for sure.
And if you're a clinician listening and you treat kids who are having these behaviors, I feel like there has to be an accompanying parent process to support. Yeah.
We have one and we teach one at my practice and in the community and nationally in courses. But I would agree with you that I think a lot of times it's perceived that the parent is being demanding or willful when in fact they're just traumatized and they need their own support. And we need to see that just like we've been talking this whole time about, we need to see the emotion underneath the behavior. For teenagers, the same applies to parents.
Oh, yes. It's like we get to be compassionate towards everyone here. It's
Yeah.
so hard. And there's massive amounts of grief work as well, as I've found, of living with the
Mhm.
possibility that your child may not live the long life that you dreamed for them. And just holding that possibility is so heartbreaking that we have to have avenues where we can talk about it. And the silencing around self-harm for teenagers is
Mhm.
so intense that who can you tell? Who can you talk to?
It's not an easy coffee chat with your mom friend.
Exactly. Yes. And for some people, it can be really threatening to name this if you're
Mhm.
in a more marginalized body, or if you're in a court battle,
For
it can
sure.
be, there can be so much at stake. And in telling the truth about what you're
Yeah.
facing. I know we've only just brushed the surface of what there is to say about these topics.
Yeah.
So I want you to tell us first about your book and second about your practice, so that if people
Mhm.
are local to you or travel to you, I know you take folks from all over. So tell us about those two ways that we can learn more about the kind of healing that you offer.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
My book is called You're on Fire, It's Fine: Effective Strategies for Parenting Teens with Self-Destructive Behaviors. You can find it anywhere online that you buy books, or you can go to my website, youronfireitsfine.com, and you can download a free chapter and some other resources there
Hmm.
that will be helpful for you.
Thank you for doing that. I love when
Of
people put
course.
up a free resource because it lets you, because if you love that chapter, then you know it's worth
Right.
buying the book.
You got
So
to test the waters a little bit, see if it's for
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
And my practice is called Creative Healing. We're in the greater Philadelphia area. The website is creativehealingphilly.com. But we also run a summer camp. People travel from all over to come to our summer camp. It's a week-long intensive for teenagers to teach them all of those skills that I was talking about, of being aware of your emotions, coping with your emotions, learning your distress tolerance strategies. And we've run it every year for almost a decade. It sells out every year. And it's really exciting to see the gains at the end of the week for all the participants.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most encouraging pieces of all of this is, I think you talk about this in the book, that things change quickly for teenagers. It is
Yeah,
one of their great strengths is that they can turn on a
right.
dime. So
Well, yeah,
a
for
week,
good, for better or
for
worse,
good
but
or for bad, exactly. But a week is a long time in a teenage brain, and a lot can happen in a week. Yeah.
it's immersive, so it really helps them make those changes that are required.
Beautiful. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for all the ways that you are showing up for some of the teenagers in our world who most need a someone like you and your whole team.
Thank
And I know
you.
what it takes to put down your pain and your story in a book for other people to read and have opinions about. So thank you for taking that brave step too, to write it all down for us. It's a great book and it's an easy read, which is so important when our brains are like mush. So
Totally. Well,
it's a
thank you.
it's a compassionate book. I felt, okay, I can at least finish this one.
It's nice to hear. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, thanks so much.